I am truly nervous and having a minor anxiety.
Just don't have an anxiety
Now I
attack.
know my Kid Stitch seminar, guys. I get it.
We get it!
Don't do that though.
Okay.
You're prepared. We're ready to go. Let's do this.
Okay.
All right. Do we want to just start with question 1?
Yeah.
Go
Do
for
it.
it.
Okay. So Steinbeck uses candy to paint a picture of the world on the ranch through his opinions on the boss, Curly, and Curly's wife. What kinds of opinions does he reveal about each person? Maybe we'll start there before we go on to the next one.
Yeah, sounds good.
Sweet.
Love it. It says that
Cool.
the boss's son, he
Oh,
said
there we go.
quietly, Curly's pretty handy. He done quite a bit. He's a lightweight and he's handy. And then when he talked about Curly, I can't remember where it was, but he said like that he was small but like loves to pick a fight.
Mm-hmm.
That just reminded me of like Napoleon and like this whole like Napoleon complex, like the little guys always trying to like pick fights with the big guys in order to like prove their dominance.
To build
that's
off
kind of the
Of
picture
what
that I had.
Miss Keene is saying. Totally interrupted you. Perfect.
Cool.
That's actually on page 26. The Swamper said
Yeah.
Curly's like a lot of little guys. He hates big guys, and all the time he's picking scrap with big guys, kind of like he's mad at them because he ain't
That's
a
the
big
quote.
guy.
Yes.
Which I think he really paints a totally accurate picture of Curly for when we meet Curly later in the chapter.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
It's a pretty brilliant introduction to that character. You know what else I noticed with the way Candy speaks, and I don't think I picked this up before without reading it again, but the names. Like, Crooks has a crooked back, so he's Crooks, which I know sounds like, of course, duh.
Right. And like Slim.
Slim.
Is, like,
'cause he's
tall.
yeah, so it's
Mhm.
like they're given like these pet names almost.
And it almost doesn't go beyond like what they look like.
Which is
Like,
then
you know what I
interesting
mean?
when we meet, it's Curly's wife, right?
Yeah.
And how she doesn't
Yes.
even have a name, so then you can think about, well, like, she doesn't even have a name, so...
She's not
and it
even
doesn't-
human.
It's not even human,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, she's not worth their time. They've already like written her off. I think it's on.
But when they start talking about her?
Yeah. So, it's on my page 31.
Yeah.
No, just kidding. That's Curly's wife actually talking. I don't have the page number exactly, but when he starts
28.
talking about Curly's wife,
Oh, and how she's... And then,
she's got the
she's got the
eye.
eye.
She's a tart. Like, who cares about her anymore?
Oh.
Like, she's just bad news. Like, she don't need a name.
Someone
Well,
calls him a tart.
She's a hoe.
The swamper calls her a tart.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like to say that the other people, going off of what Miss Nelson said, that it doesn't go beyond their features, that these men have nicknames, that the only feature that just is distinguishable of this woman is that she's someone's wife.
Yeah.
And they don't even give her, because they could call her Tart, they could call her Legs, they could
True.
call her,
Oh, they don't even
Yeah.
like give her a nickname.
Yeah.
no,
No.
it's just, they could call her a whore.
Yeah.
Instead, they're just like Curly's wife.
Yeah.
That's it.
Who's got the eye?
And he tells a story about the boss, right, earlier about how, because he says that he's a good man,
Mm-hmm.
right? He was upset that they weren't there, but then that he bought like a whole gallon of whiskey
Yeah.
for them to all hang around with.
So I laughed at that because I was like, oh, so that's what makes
A good
boss.
Right.
Like if they buy you booze. Like, but
But
that
then-
seems to be what it hinges on because that was like their time of like fun, and he like rehashes that memory about how everyone was included, including Crooks, and they had such a good time.
which
and even
is
including the stable boy.
yeah, which is really interesting to think about that because I feel like in a lot of ways the whole entire chapter it's never really about them being together except for that one part. Everything else is like separated out, like, well, this is this person, this is this person, this is this person, but then like this one time they were all together and they remember that as being great, so why do they separate everyone?
I think that's such an interesting point because while Candy, he really, like, Steinbeck uses Candy and introduces to a bunch of characters, when we meet Slim has that great quote about men don't travel in pairs.
Yeah.
That's
What
on
page
the
is
top of
that?
page 35.
I
And
love
it
that
says,
part.
ain't many guys travel around together. I don't know why. Maybe everyone in the whole damn world is just scared of each other. Which I think is so, like, it just demonstrates why when whiskey is involved, that maybe they let down their guard and they can actually,
Be the
create
They're not-
some sort of community.
They're not feeling like they have to like keep the separation like to be safe or based off of almost how they look, because so again it goes back to a lot of that mentality. But I don't know, that is really interesting.
And this is an idea that is repeated already because, like, in chapter 1, when we first meet Lenny and George, like, George basically says this idea to Lenny, like, men travel alone, but what's different about us, we travel together, and that's why we can continue moving forward and, you know,
So
working
that's their
towards-
world.
Yeah, it's their world.
Like that's the norm of this world, is that it's like every man for himself.
Yeah.
Almost.
To go on that point too, Andy, what you said, on page 27, when the old man, so Candy, was talking to George towards the bottom there, they were kind of like talking smack about Curly, right? Like he was trying to tell George about Curly, but he was kind of hesitant at first, right? So he like I know I do this all the time. You kind of test the waters, right? You kind of say one thing about one person, then you see their reaction. And if they react how you want, then you kind of keep going. So it was like he said that bit about the Vaseline, and George was kind of curious. So then Candy took it as like a wide open door, and he was reassured. So like this idea that you can't really trust many people. Right, like you have to be careful of who you talk to and the things that you say to different people.
And I think that that's really where Steinbeck, to kind of go into this next question, does Steinbeck want us to trust Candy's perspective? I think that to see that he's not just that like flat character who's like, Slim is this guy.
Yeah.
That he actually, because he tests the water and he turns himself into a real person with feelings, I think you can trust him. I think he shows that he's not just going to like describe people to you, but that he does have opinions of these people too.
Right, and I think also the fact that he's older, a lot of times you tend to trust like those older characters because they're wise beyond
Plus
their
the
years.
fact that he has one hand, so then he's weaker and disabled somewhat as well, so then that always evokes like a little bit more sympathy towards him, which makes you feel like, oh, I can trust this guy, because like someone who looks like that isn't going to be like,
Yeah.
And he's got the old dog, right? He's the character of
Yes.
the old dog. So he's got this old dog that's following around, so he's loyal to him. So, you know, a dog wouldn't stick around for beyond his
I
years.
never
for
even
an
thought about
owner.
that piece to it.
Yeah, for an owner that mistreats him, and, you know, he's, you know, so he's with them.
Killing it,
Oh.
Betsy. Oh, Miss Boy.
That was a good building moment.
Yes.
That was really cool.
So I'm such a nerd, and then in the that part that you were referring to, Miss Keene, where it says like the old man was reassured, he had drawn a derogatory statement from George. All I could think was, is this man a gossip? So, and I think that kind of plays into like, do we trust him? Do we not? Because you guys are saying yes, we do. He is. I think that's a really good point. He's compassionate. He's got this dog that's loyal to him, but I'm still worried about Candy.
That's how I feel ultimately.
What is he capable of?
I never thought of that.
Well, and he spills the
That's
beans to
smart.
people.
I just questioned it
Yeah.
because I go back to like, if you're only talking about people and describing people at this like surface level, like can you really trust that they have this like full picture or this full
But
perspective? But I don't know if that's also maybe like getting my own like experiences or opinions and bringing it to there, or like if it's rooted.
But that's what we do.
Yeah.
I mean, to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But I would almost disagree with that, only because, and it's a good point that both of you raise, but he says on page 19, when he talks about why that older man left, because George is upset about there possibly being like fleas and roaches and lice and all that kind of stuff in his bunk, and he was like, no, the guy that was there before you was great and everyone loved him, and George is like, then why did he leave, right? And the guy's like, he just quit, the way guys do. Like, I think that's just this world. I think that characters in this world only know each other through surface level.
That's a good
They
point.
only know that.
That's
So
a good
this
point.
man, I don't think he's being a gossip. I think he's saying like, hey, you're here. This is who you're going to be working with, but they don't know more.
Almost
than
like there's
that.
no point to really build those relationships and dive in because people just move around from place
The
to place
only
so much.
person that they mention is like I shouldn't say smart, but like well-read. They said Crooks.
Yeah.
And they constantly refer to him as the N-word.
Yeah.
And they like beat him up, and they like to see him fight, and it's like, well, that's the only man that seems like he like values talking to people and wants to be in the group and
wants to learn.
But it seems like for everyone else, then all they value is just doing their little bit of work. Because I think it's somewhere in this chapter where they talk about, well, like, you're really here to work because you got here on this day. If you came here on Saturday, the boss, and saying, like, you guys really want to work then, because if you came on this day, then this would have happened. And I forgot the whole dialogue, but yeah, that's...
And you could get a couple free meals and not have lifted a
Exactly,
finger, basically.
yeah.
The other thing that I would say about Candy to consider is the loneliness factor. Everyone is out working, and he's not, because he's just the swamper, right? So he's cleaning out the bunkhouse. He's, you know what I mean? He's got his dog, and I know we'll talk about that later too. But the fact that he's almost trying to convince George and Lenny that, like, this is a good place. Like, you'll be okay here, and, you know, who knows, maybe we'll be friends, and, you know, we'll explore that later too.
Yeah.
So.
Not to mention, if he's always kind of moving around and cleaning up people's messes and things, so he probably sees more than what other people see, and he has the time to evaluate it. But I personally would probably be a little cautious of him, you know, if he's telling me all these stories, because he's trying to convince them that they're not going to get lice, and I'd be like, you know, are you sure? You know, so it's one of those, like, are you sure that's what's going on, or are you just trying to kind of make me stay because because you need me here? So I would probably be cautious of him, but I would be trusting but cautious.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, in so at the very end of the chapter on page 37, there's a quote that I don't know why, but it always stands out to me, where it says they went out the door, the sunshine lay in a thin line under the window. From a distance there could be heard a rattle of dishes. The part where it says, like, the sunshine lay in a thin line under the window, I feel like that kind of speaks to this idea of, like, the light is, like, being shut out, and, like, now they're kind of, like, in this, like, unknown, like, dark place, and that makes them feel, like, uncomfortable, and makes Lenny feel, in particular, like, uncomfortable.
which is so different from how much light was in
The first
chapter.
Yeah.
How cool.
Oh no, what is gonna happen?
What is gonna happen?
Bum, bum, bum.